You know that feeling when you wake up at 2 a.m. and something just feels wrong? That pit in your stomach that tells you everything you believed in is about to shatter? That was me, Grace, 55 years old, retired teacher, married for 30 years to a man I thought I knew. I woke up that night to an empty bed. The sheets were cold. David's side hadn't been slept in. And then I heard it, his voice, low and urgent, coming from outside. I tiptoed to the window, my heart already racing, and I listened. "We need to sell the house immediately," he whispered into the phone. "I'll transfer the money to you, and then we'll move abroad." My blood ran cold. But what came next? That's what destroyed me. I'm leaving Grace, abandoning her and the kids, all of them. 30 years, 3 children, 1 house, the only real asset we had, and he was throwing it all away. But here's the thing. I didn't scream. I didn't confront him. I didn't cry. Because in that moment, standing at that window in my old nightgown, something inside me changed. The naive, trusting Grace died right there, and someone new was born. Someone who was going to fight back. You see, David always called himself a small business owner. He'd talk about big investments and opportunities while we lived paycheck to paycheck. I taught elementary school for 33 years. I knew every dollar in our account. And I knew this house, our family home where we raised our children, was all we had. So when I heard him plotting to steal it from under me, to hand it over to someone else, to leave me with nothing, I realized something crucial. My husband wasn't just a cheater, he was a thief, and he was using business as his disguise. The next morning, I made him breakfast like nothing happened. Eggs, toast, coffee, just like every other morning. He kissed my forehead and told me he loved me. I smiled and told him to have a good day. But inside, I was already at war. That afternoon, I drove to a small electronics store 3 towns over, paid cash, bought a voice-activated recording device, smaller than a lipstick. The guy behind the counter didn't ask questions. I didn't offer explanations. That evening, while David was in the shower, I planted it in his car. Under the driver's seat, tucked into the fabric where no one would ever look. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. But I did it. For 3 months, I became a spy in my own marriage. I cooked his meals, I did his laundry, I smiled when he came home. And every single day, I retrieved that recording device, downloaded the conversations, and documented everything. Every phone call, every meeting, every lie. I learned things about the man I married that made me sick. But I never wavered. Because I knew if I was going to survive this, if I was going to protect myself and my children, I needed evidence. Real, undeniable, court-ready evidence. And let me tell you something. I got it. Her name was Tiffany. Young, beautiful, and apparently the business partner David had been talking about for months. I found out about her in week 2 of my investigation. Her voice on the recordings was sweet, flirtatious, and calculated. She called him baby. She talked about their future together. She mentioned the house, my house, like it was already hers. "Once we get the property transferred," she said in one recording, "we can start our new life. No baggage, no complications." Baggage. She meant me, my children, our entire life together. Baggage. But here's what fascinated me. Tiffany wasn't just some affair. She was part of the plan. David wasn't just running away with her. He was funneling our assets to her, using fake business contracts, creating paper trails that made it look legitimate. I sat at my kitchen table one afternoon, listening to a recording from that morning. David had met her at a cafe downtown. They were discussing the company they were forming together. "So once the house sells," Tiffany asked, "the proceeds go into the LLC account, right?" "Exactly," David replied. "It'll be registered as a capital investment from me to the company. Then we control it completely. Grace won't be able to touch it." I had to pause the recording. Had to breathe. Had to stop myself from throwing the laptop across the room. This wasn't just adultery. This was fraud. Systematic, premeditated fraud. But instead of falling apart, I got smarter. I started researching. Late at night, after David was asleep, I'd be on my laptop reading about fraudulent transfers, shell companies, asset protection. I learned more about business law in those 3 months than in my entire life. I discovered that what David was planning had a name: fraudulent transfer. It's when someone moves assets to avoid paying debts or to cheat someone out of what they're owed. In a divorce, it's illegal, very illegal, and I was documenting every single step of it. One recording stood out. David and Tiffany were in his car, my recording device catching every word. "What about the kids?" Tiffany asked. "Won't they fight this?" David laughed. Actually, laughed. "They're adults now. They'll be fine. Grace will probably move in with one of them. She's resourceful." Resourceful. That's what he called me while planning to rob me blind. But you know what? He was right. I am resourceful. I started photographing documents. David kept everything in his home office: contracts, bank statements, property records. He was so confident I'd never suspect him that he didn't even lock the filing cabinet. Every Thursday, he had a standing meeting, or so he said. That was my window. I'd photograph everything, upload it to a secure cloud account, and put it all back exactly as I found it. I found the LLC paperwork, a company called Horizon Ventures, registered just 6 months earlier. 2 members, David and Tiffany. No actual business operations, no revenue, no employees, just a shell, a beautiful, fraudulent shell designed to steal my home. I found Attorney Miller through a friend of a friend, someone who didn't ask too many questions about why a retired teacher needed the best divorce lawyer in 3 counties. His office was downtown, in one of those old buildings with wooden panels and leather chairs, the kind of place that smells like old books and expensive cologne. I sat across from him with my laptop, 3 months of recordings, and a folder full of photographs. He listened to the first recording, the midnight phone call. His expression never changed: professional, calm. But I saw his jaw tighten when David said he was abandoning us. "Mrs. Grace," he said, leaning back in his chair, "what you have here is extraordinary. Most people come to me with suspicions. You've come with a criminal case." "I don't want to send him to jail," I said quickly. "I just want what's mine, the house, my security." Miller smiled, not warmly, but with something like respect. "Mrs. Grace, I don't think you understand. By the time we're done, you won't just keep your house. You'll own it outright. And your husband will be lucky if he's not facing criminal charges." He spent the next 2 hours analyzing everything: the recordings, the documents, the LLC formation. He made calls to investigators, accountants, even a forensic specialist. Horizon Ventures, he said, pulling up state business records on his computer, was registered on April 15th, 6 months ago. Tiffany Morrison is listed as managing member. But look at this. She has no business history, no credit, no assets. She's 28 years old and supposedly running a real estate investment company. "So it's fake," I said. "It's a shell," Miller corrected, "created for one purpose: to receive stolen assets. Your husband planned to sell your marital home, transfer the proceeds to this company as a business investment, and then leave the country with the money and the girl." Classic fraudulent transfer. My hands were shaking. Hearing it laid out like that, so clinical, so calculated, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "What do we do?" I asked. Miller opened a fresh legal pad. "First, we file for divorce immediately. Second, we get a restraining order, not on your husband, but on the house. We freeze the sale. Third, we file a motion to expose Horizon Ventures as a fraudulent entity. And fourth," he looked up at me, and this time his smile was almost predatory, "we let your husband walk right into the trap he built for himself." The next day, David came home excited. "Grace, honey, I have amazing news. I found a buyer for the house, an investor who's willing to pay above market value. It's the break we've been waiting for." I was stirring soup on the stove. I didn't turn around. "That's wonderful, dear. When?" "We need to move fast. They want to close in 30 days. I already signed the listing agreement." There it was, the beginning of the end. He'd started the sale without my signature, assuming I'd just go along with it. Assuming I was still the trusting wife who believed every word. 30 days, I repeated. That's so quick. I know, but think about it. We could finally take that trip we always talked about. Maybe Europe? Australia? He was selling the fantasy, the future, our future. Except in his version, I didn't exist. I turned around and smiled. That sounds lovely, David, whatever you think is best. He kissed my forehead and went to his office to make calls. Probably to Tiffany, probably celebrating. And I pulled out my phone and texted Miller. He started the sale. Time to move. The papers were filed on a Friday morning. Divorce petition. Restraining order on the property. Motion to investigate Horizon Ventures for fraud. All of it, submitted to family court with 3 months of documented evidence attached. David found out that afternoon. He came home looking like someone had punched him in the stomach. His face was pale. His hands were shaking. He was holding the court summons like it might explode. "Grace," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "what the hell is this?" I was watering the plants in the living room. I'd been preparing for this moment for weeks, but my heart was still racing. I set down the watering can and turned to face him. "It's a divorce petition, David. I thought that was obvious." "Divorce? What are you talking about? Why would you—" He stopped. Realization was dawning. "The house. You put a restraining order on the house. The sale can't go through now. Grace, do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes," I said calmly. "I've protected myself from being robbed by my husband." His face changed. The shock became anger. "Robbed? Are you insane? I was trying to secure our future. That investor was going to pay—" "There is no investor," I interrupted. "There's Tiffany and Horizon Ventures, and a fraudulent scheme to steal this house from me." The color drained from his face completely now. "How did you— What are you—" "I know everything, David. Every phone call, every meeting, every lie. I've been recording you for 3 months. He stumbled backward like I'd physically pushed him. "You've been recording me? That's illegal. You can't—" "Actually, I can, and I did. And my attorney has everything. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to move out of this house today. You're going to comply with every court order, and you're going to pray that the district attorney decides not to press criminal charges for fraudulent transfer." I'd never seen David speechless before. In 30 years of marriage, he always had an answer, always had an explanation. But standing there in our living room, holding those court papers, he had nothing. "Grace, please," he finally said. "You don't understand. It's not what you think. Tiffany and I, it's just business. We were going to—" "I heard the recording, David. The one where you said you were leaving me, abandoning me and the children. That's not business. That's betrayal." He tried a different approach, came closer, put on the face he used when he wanted something. "Look, okay, maybe I made some mistakes. Maybe I handled this wrong. But we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can— Get out. Grace, get out of my house." He left that night, packed a bag and went to stay at a motel, according to the private investigator Miller had hired. And the next morning, Attorney Miller filed additional motions to compel discovery of all Horizon Ventures financial records, to depose Tiffany Morrison, and to freeze all joint bank accounts. The court moved fast, faster than I expected. Within a week, we had a preliminary hearing. David showed up with his own lawyer, some guy he found who looked nervous the moment he saw the evidence binders Miller brought. The judge was a woman in her 60s, Judge Patricia Hendricks. She read through the preliminary motions with reading glasses perched on her nose, and I watched her expression change from neutral to concerned to outright angry. "Mr. David," she said, looking up from the papers, "you created an LLC 6 months ago with a woman who is not your wife. You attempted to transfer your marital home to this LLC under the guise of a business transaction, and according to these recordings, you plan to leave the country afterward?" David's lawyer started to speak, but the judge held up her hand. "I've seen a lot in 20 years on this bench, but this is one of the more brazen attempts at asset hiding I've encountered. The restraining order stands, the house sale is blocked, and I'm ordering a full financial investigation of Horizon Ventures. We'll reconvene in 30 days. David looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, but we were just getting started. The forensic accountant's name was Rebecca Torres. She was in her 40s, sharp as a knife, and had spent 15 years tracking hidden assets for divorce cases. Miller hired her immediately after the preliminary hearing. Within 2 weeks, she uncovered what David had been building. We met in Miller's office, me, Miller, and Rebecca, who had brought printed reports that looked like they weighed 10 pounds. "Your husband," Rebecca began, "is either incredibly stupid or incredibly arrogant. Usually when someone tries to hide assets, they at least try to make it look real. This," she gestured to the reports, "this is amateur hour." She walked me through it. Horizon Ventures had been registered as a real estate investment company. On paper, it looked legitimate. Proper LLC formation, business bank account, even a professional website. But it was all smoke and mirrors. "Look at the banking records," Rebecca said, pulling up statements. "The company has received exactly 3 deposits, all from David. The first was $5,000 to open the account. The second was $10,000 labeled as initial capital investment. The third was $25,000 labeled as business development." $40,000, I said quietly. Money I didn't know was missing. "Exactly. But here's the interesting part. Look at the withdrawals. Regular payments for rent on a luxury apartment downtown, $3,000 a month for the last 5 months. Credit card payments for restaurants, jewelry, travel. This isn't a business account. It's David's slush fund for his mistress." I felt sick, not just because of the money, though $40,000 was devastating, but because of how long he'd been planning this. 5 months of paying for her apartment, months of dinners and gifts and building a life while lying to mine. "And the house sale?" Miller asked. "That's where it gets criminal," Rebecca replied. "According to the sale agreement I obtained, the buyer is listed as Horizon Ventures LLC. The purchase price is $450,000, which is about market value for the property. But look at the payment structure." She pulled out the contract. David, as the seller, was supposed to receive the $450,000. But according to this side agreement I found in the company records, David was simultaneously agreeing to invest the entire $450,000 into Horizon Ventures as capital contribution. So the money would go into the company account, where both David and Tiffany have equal control. "So the house would belong to the company," I said, understanding, "and David and Tiffany would own the company together." "Exactly. And you'd have no claim to it because it would be a corporate asset, not a marital asset. Except," Rebecca smiled, "this is textbook fraudulent transfer. David would be taking a marital asset, transferring it to a third party to avoid paying you in a divorce, and claiming it's a legitimate business transaction. The court will demolish this." Miller leaned back in his chair, satisfied. "We have him. The recordings prove intent, the financial records prove execution, and the fact that he started this LLC while still married, using marital funds and involving his mistress, it's over." But it wasn't over. Not yet. Because the next day, David did something desperate. He showed up at the house. I was having coffee on the porch when his car pulled into the driveway. He got out slowly, and I could see he hadn't slept. His eyes were red. His clothes were wrinkled. "Grace," he called out, "please, just 5 minutes. Let me explain." I should have called the police. The restraining order meant he wasn't supposed to be there. But something in his voice, something broken, made me hesitate. "You have 3 minutes," I said. "From the driveway. Don't come any closer." He nodded, staying by his car. "I know what this looks like. I know you think I'm a monster. But Grace, I swear, I never meant to hurt you. I felt trapped. The business was failing. We had no money. And Tiffany, she offered me a way out, a chance to start over." "By stealing our house?" "It wasn't stealing. I was going to give you money. Once we got established abroad, I was going to send you—" "Send me what, David? Guilt money? Charity? After you abandoned me and took everything we built together?" He was crying now, actually crying. "I made a mistake, a huge mistake. But we can fix this. We can stop the divorce. I'll end things with Tiffany. I'll make this right." And there it was, the manipulation I'd fallen for 1,000 times before. The tears, the promises, the version of David that made me want to forgive him. But I wasn't that Grace anymore. No, I said simply. We're done. See you in court. I went inside and locked the door, and I heard him standing there for a few more minutes before his car finally pulled away. That night, Miller called. David's attorney contacted me. They want to negotiate a settlement, avoid trial. What kind of settlement? They're offering you the house and $100,000 in exchange for dropping the fraud investigation. I thought about it. A clean break, the house, some money, no trial, no drama. No, I said. I want everything, and I want him to face consequences. Miller chuckled. I was hoping you'd say that. Tiffany Morrison's deposition was scheduled for a Tuesday morning at Miller's office. I wasn't required to be there, but Miller suggested I come anyway. She's the weak link, he explained. David's a liar, but he's had 30 years of practice. Tiffany? This is her first rodeo. She's going to crack. She walked in at 9 a.m. exactly, dressed in a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly retirement check. Young, pretty, confident. She smiled at the court reporter like this was a business meeting, not a legal interrogation. Miller started gentle, basic questions. Her background, her education, her work history. So, Ms. Morrison, you're currently unemployed? I'm an entrepreneur, she corrected, smiling. I run my own investment company. Horizon Ventures? Yes. And when did you start this company? About 6 months ago. Prior to that, what was your occupation? Her smile faltered slightly. I worked in retail and hospitality. You were a cocktail waitress, Miller clarified, looking at his notes. I was in customer service at an upscale lounge, yes. And you have no formal education in business, finance, or real estate? I'm self-taught. Miller nodded, making notes. Let's talk about Horizon Ventures. How did you raise capital to start this investment company? I had a business partner who provided initial funding. David, correct? Yes. How did you meet David? For the first time, she hesitated. Through mutual friends. What friends? I don't remember specifically. Miller pulled out a document. Ms. Morrison, I have credit card receipts showing you and David having dinner together 9 months ago, before Horizon Ventures existed. Would you say that's accurate? She shifted in her seat. I might have had a business meeting with him, yes. A business meeting at a romantic French restaurant? At night? Where, according to the receipt, you shared a $300 bottle of wine? Her lawyer, a young guy who looked increasingly uncomfortable, finally spoke. Counselor, what's the relevance of— The relevance, Miller interrupted, is that Ms. Morrison is claiming this is a legitimate business relationship when the evidence suggests otherwise. Ms. Morrison, are you romantically involved with David? She looked at her lawyer, who nodded reluctantly. I declined to answer based on my Fifth Amendment rights. The room went silent. Even the court reporter looked up. Miller smiled. Let me rephrase. Are you aware that David is married? Yes. And you're aware that the property Horizon Ventures was meant to acquire is David's marital home? I understood it was a business asset. Did you know that David's wife, Mrs. Grace, who is sitting right there, has lived in that house for 30 years, raised her children there, has her entire life in that home? Tiffany looked at me for the first time, really looked at me. And I saw something flicker in her eyes. Guilt? Shame? Fear? I didn't ask about his personal life, she said quietly. No, Miller agreed, but you benefited from it. You've been living in an apartment paid for by Horizon Ventures, which is funded entirely by David, for the past 5 months, correct? The company pays for my housing as part of my compensation. What compensation? Horizon Ventures has never generated a single dollar of revenue. It has no clients, no investments, no business operations whatsoever. It exists solely to receive money from David and pay for your lifestyle. Her lawyer tried to object, but Miller pressed on. Ms. Morrison, did David ever tell you he was planning to leave his wife? She was sweating now. We discussed possibilities. Did he tell you he was going to transfer the marital home to your company and then leave the country with you? I want to consult with my attorney, she said suddenly. Miller leaned back. Take your time. They whispered for 5 minutes while the rest of us sat in uncomfortable silence. When they finished, her lawyer addressed Miller. My client wishes to invoke her Fifth Amendment rights regarding any questions about the business structure or future plans with David, which was basically an admission of guilt. Miller ended the deposition shortly after. As Tiffany was leaving, she passed my chair. She stopped, looked down at me, and for just a second, I thought she might apologize. Instead, she said, "You should have taken better care of him." I could have responded, could have torn into her, but I just smiled and said, "Enjoy the fraud charges." She left quickly after that. The district attorney's office had been reviewing the case for 3 weeks. Rebecca Torres had provided them with all the financial evidence. Miller had submitted the recordings, and after Tiffany's disastrous deposition, where she'd pleaded the Fifth Amendment a dozen times, the DA decided there was enough for criminal charges. David was arrested on a Thursday morning at his motel room. I wasn't there, but Miller got the police report. They knocked at 6 a.m. David answered in his underwear, clearly still asleep. They read him his rights and handcuffed him right there in the doorway. Charges: fraudulent transfer of assets, attempted theft by deception, and conspiracy to commit fraud. He called me from jail. I'd blocked his number, but somehow he got through using someone else's phone. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Grace," his voice was shaking. "They arrested me. They think I'm a criminal. You have to tell them this is a misunderstanding. Please, I can't go to prison. I'll lose everything." "You already lost everything," I said, "the moment you decided to betray me." "Grace, please." "Goodbye, David." I hung up, and I blocked that number too. The arrest made local news. Local businessman arrested for fraud. It was humiliating for him. His name, his mugshot, all of it public. His friends saw it, his business contacts, our children. Our kids called me that day, all 3 of them. They'd seen the news, they'd read the charges, and they wanted to know if it was true. "Mom," my oldest son said, "Dad says this is all a mistake, that you're trying to destroy him because you're angry about the divorce." I took a deep breath. "Sweetie, I sent you the recordings. Did you listen to them?" Silence. Then, quietly, "Yeah, I listened." "Then you know what he was planning to do. To me, to this family, to our home." "But jail, Mom? Did he really need to go to jail?" "I didn't arrest him. The district attorney did that because what he did was illegal. I just documented the truth." My daughter was more supportive. "Mom, I always knew Dad was selfish, but I never thought he'd do something like this. I'm proud of you for fighting back." My youngest son didn't call at all. He sent a text. "I don't want to be involved. Don't contact me until this is over." That hurt more than anything David had done. But I couldn't stop now. The trial was coming, and I needed to be ready. David made bail, $50,000 posted by his brother. He was released with conditions: no contact with me, no contact with Tiffany, no leaving the state. He had to wear an ankle monitor, report to a probation officer weekly. His attorney, a new one now, more expensive, filed motions to dismiss the criminal charges, argued that this was a civil matter, not criminal, that there was no intent to defraud, that everything David did was a legitimate business transaction. The DA's office fired back with a 40-page response, laying out the entire scheme: the fake LLC, the mistress, the midnight phone calls, the plan to flee the country. They even included my testimony, written statements about the 30 years of marriage, the trust, the betrayal. The judge denied the motion to dismiss. The criminal trial was set for 6 months out. But the divorce trial? That was happening in 3 weeks. Miller prepared me like I was going to war. We rehearsed my testimony. We organized the evidence into binders, chronologically, by category, color-coded. We prepared for every question David's attorney might ask. "He's going to try to make you look vindictive," Miller warned, "like you're doing this out of revenge, not justice. So when he asks why you recorded David, what do you say?" "Because I needed proof," I answered. "Because I knew no one would believe me without it." "Good. And when he asks why you didn't try counseling or communication?" Because you can't negotiate with someone who's stealing from you. Miller smiled. Perfect. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that midnight phone call, the moment everything changed, the moment I decided to stop being a victim and start being a fighter. I thought about Tiffany, probably in her luxury apartment, wondering if she'd be next to face charges. I thought about David, in his motel room with an ankle monitor, probably hating me more than he'd ever loved me. And I thought about myself, 55 years old, about to stand in court and tell the world how my husband tried to rob me blind. But I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, rows of benches that reminded me of church pews. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Miller, my hands folded in my lap, trying to look calm even though my heart was racing. David sat across the aisle with his attorney. He wouldn't look at me, just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, like if he ignored me hard enough, I'd disappear. Judge Hendricks entered, and we all stood. She settled into her chair, adjusted her glasses, and looked at both tables. This is a dissolution of marriage between Grace and David, married for 30 years, with disputed property and allegations of fraud. I've reviewed the pretrial motions and evidence submissions. This is going to be a bench trial, no jury. I'll hear testimony, review evidence, and make my ruling. Let's begin. Miller stood. Your Honor, we're ready to present our case. He started with the timeline, put up a large poster board with dates and events, walking the judge through everything. The marriage, the years of financial struggles, David's business ventures that never materialized, the creation of Horizon Ventures, the midnight phone call, my investigation. Then he called me to the stand. I'd been preparing for this moment for months, but walking up there, raising my right hand, swearing to tell the truth, it was surreal. I sat down and Miller approached with a kind smile. Mrs. Grace, how long were you married to David? 30 years. We got married when I was 25. He was 27. And during that marriage, did you work? Yes, I was an elementary school teacher for 33 years. I just retired 2 years ago. And what was your understanding of your family's financial situation? I took a breath. We were comfortable but not wealthy. We owned our home, no mortgage, we paid it off 15 years ago. We had modest retirement savings. David ran a small business, but it never generated significant income. We lived carefully. Did you consider your home to be your primary asset? Yes, it was everything, our security, our legacy for the children. Miller nodded. Now, I want to take you back to the night of the phone call. Can you describe what happened? I told the story, the empty bed, the whispered conversation, the words that destroyed my world. I didn't cry, I'd cried enough already. I just spoke clearly, factually, looking directly at the judge. What did you do after you heard that conversation? Miller asked. I made a decision. I decided to protect myself, so I began documenting everything. Why didn't you confront your husband? Because I knew he'd deny it. I knew he'd manipulate me. I'd been with him for 30 years. I knew how he operated. I needed proof. Miller walked me through the investigation, the recording device, the 3 months of documentation, the discovery of Tiffany, the fake LLC, the fraudulent sale agreement. Mrs. Grace, why are we here today? What do you want from this divorce? I want my home, the home I lived in for 30 years, the home I raised my children in, the home my husband tried to steal from me, and I want the court to recognize that what he did was wrong. David's attorney cross-examined me. His name was Peterson, and he was good, I'll give him that. Smooth, professional, with a voice that made everything sound reasonable. Mrs. Grace, isn't it true that you never actually asked your husband about this so-called scheme? Never gave him a chance to explain? I heard him explain it himself, on the recordings. But you didn't confront him. You went straight to spying on him, recording him without his knowledge. Isn't that a violation of trust? I almost laughed. A violation of trust? He was planning to abandon me and steal our house. I think he violated trust first. Your Honor, Peterson said, the witness is being argumentative. Overruled, Judge Hendricks said dryly. The The question was argumentative. She can respond in kind. Continue, Mrs. Grace. I looked at Peterson. You asked why I recorded him. Because I needed evidence. Because in a divorce, it's not enough to say, I think my husband is stealing from me. You need proof. So I got proof. Peterson tried another angle. Isn't it true that Horizon Ventures was a legitimate business venture? That your husband was trying to build something for your future? If it was legitimate, why did he plan to leave me behind? Why did he tell his mistress he was abandoning his family? Allegedly told. We only have your word and these recordings, which may have been taken out of context. Miller stood. Your Honor, we have over 20 hours of recordings. We can play them all if opposing counsel thinks they're out of context. Judge Hendricks nodded. I've listened to the relevant portions. The context is clear. Move on, Mr. Peterson. He tried for another hour, but nothing landed. Every question, I had an answer. Every accusation, I had evidence. Finally, Miller called Rebecca Torres, the forensic accountant. She brought charts, spreadsheets, bank records, walked the judge through every dollar that flowed through Horizon Ventures. Your Honor, this is not a business. This is a slush fund. Every deposit comes from the defendant. Every withdrawal goes to support his mistress or to prepare for the fraudulent property transfer. There's no legitimate business activity whatsoever. Peterson tried to discredit her, but she was unshakable. 20 years of experience, hundreds of cases. She'd seen every trick, and she knew exactly what David had done. By the end of day one, I could see it in Judge Hendricks' face. She was angry, not just at David, but at the whole situation, at the betrayal, at the audacity. We broke for the day, and Miller walked me to my car. That was perfect, he said. You were calm, credible, strong. She believes you. What about tomorrow, I asked. Tomorrow, David testifies. And that's when we finish this. David took the stand at 9 a.m. He'd worn a suit, navy blue, white shirt, conservative tie, trying to look respectable, trustworthy, like a man who could never do what he was accused of. His attorney started with softball questions. How long he'd been married, his love for his family, his business struggles, painting him as a desperate man who made a mistake, not a calculating fraud. David, can you explain to the court what Horizon Ventures was supposed to be? David cleared his throat. It was going to be a real estate investment company. Tiffany had connections in the industry. I had experience running a business. We were going to flip properties, build equity, create something substantial. And your wife, Mrs. Grace, what was her role supposed to be in this venture? She was always part of the plan. The idea was that we'd build this company, generate income, and then she could retire comfortably. I was trying to secure our future. I watched Judge Hendricks. Her expression hadn't changed, but I saw her write something down. What about the phone conversation Mrs. Grace recorded? The one where you allegedly said you were leaving her? David shook his head. I never said that. Or if I did, she misunderstood. I might have been talking about leaving the country temporarily for business, not abandoning her. And the relationship with Ms. Morrison? It was purely professional. Yes, we had dinners, business dinners. That's how deals get done. There was nothing inappropriate. Peterson sat down, satisfied. Then Miller stood up. David, you testified that Horizon Ventures was a legitimate real estate investment company. How many properties has this company purchased? Well, none yet, but how many properties has it sold? None, but we were just getting started. How many clients does it have? We were building the client base. So the answer is 0 clients, 0 properties, 0 business activity? David shifted. We were in the development phase. For 6 months? Yes. Miller pulled out a document. Your Honor, this is the operating agreement for Horizon Ventures. It lists 2 members, David and Tiffany Morrison. According to this agreement, they have equal ownership. David contributed $40,000 in capital. What did Ms. Morrison contribute? David hesitated. She contributed her expertise. $40,000 worth of expertise? From a woman with no business experience, no education, no assets? She had connections. What connections? Name one. I don't remember specific names. Because there are no connections. Because this isn't a business. It's a shell company you created to hide assets from your wife. That's not true. Miller pulled out another document. This is the purchase agreement for the marital home. The buyer is listed as Horizon Ventures. The purchase price is $450,000. But this side agreement, also signed by you, shows that you agreed to immediately reinvest that $450,000 back into Horizon Ventures as capital. So the company gets the house, you get nothing, and your wife gets nothing. How is that securing her future? David was sweating now. The plan was complicated. There were tax advantages. Tax advantages? You were planning to leave the country. You said so on the recording. I said we might travel. You said you were abandoning your wife and children. Let me play the recording again. Miller nodded to the clerk, who pressed play. David's voice filled the courtroom. I'm leaving Grace, abandoning her and the kids, all of them. The room was silent. David's face was red. That was taken out of context. What context makes abandoning your family acceptable? I was frustrated. I wasn't thinking clearly. You were thinking clearly enough to create an LLC, transfer funds, plan a property sale, and coordinate with your mistress. That takes planning, David. That takes clarity. Miller pressed on, asked about the luxury apartment, the dinners, the gifts. David had an excuse for everything, but they got weaker with each question. Finally, Miller asked, David, do you love your wife? David looked at me for the first time, really looked at me. And for a moment, I saw something, regret maybe, or just fear of losing. I did love her, he said quietly. Did. Past tense? I still care about her. If you care about her, why did you try to steal her home? I wasn't stealing. You created a fake company with your mistress, planned to transfer the only significant asset from your 30-year marriage to that company and then leave the country. What would you call that? David had no answer. Miller turned to Judge Hendricks. No further questions. Closing arguments were brief. Peterson tried to argue that this was a business dispute, not fraud, that David had made mistakes but didn't have criminal intent. Miller stood and said simply, Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. This was a calculated scheme to defraud Mrs. Grace of her home and her security. The recordings prove intent. The financial records prove execution. And the defendant's own testimony proves he has no legitimate explanation. Mrs. Grace asks for justice. She asks for her home, and she asks that this court recognize what her husband tried to do to her. Judge Hendricks didn't take a recess, didn't need to review evidence. She just looked at both parties and began speaking. I've been a judge for 20 years. I've seen bitter divorces. I've seen financial disputes. But I have rarely seen something this calculated and cruel. David, you took 30 years of marriage, 30 years of trust, and you weaponized it. You planned to steal your wife's security and leave her with nothing. The evidence is overwhelming. The recordings are damning. And your testimony was, frankly, insulting to this court's intelligence. She shuffled papers. The property transfer to Horizon Ventures is void. It was a fraudulent transfer designed to hide marital assets. The house belongs to Mrs. Grace, solely, completely. You have no claim to it. Additionally, you will be responsible for all marital debts, and you will pay Mrs. Grace $75,000 in compensatory damages for the emotional distress and financial harm you caused. David looked like he'd been punched. This divorce is granted. You have 30 days to remove your personal belongings from the marital home. You're not to contact Mrs. Grace except through your attorney. And Mr. David, I suggest you thank whatever higher power you believe in that your wife is more merciful than I am. Because if I could, I'd hold you in contempt for the sheer audacity of what you attempted here. She banged her gavel. We're adjourned. I sat in my car outside the courthouse for 20 minutes after the trial ended. Just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring at nothing. Miller had congratulated me, shaken my hand, told me I'd done everything right. But I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. 30 years of marriage ended in 2 days of testimony. A life built together, dismantled in a courtroom. I'd won, yes. I'd kept my home. I'd exposed the fraud. I'd protected myself. But I'd also lost something. Maybe not something valuable anymore, but still, I'd lost the person I thought I'd grow old with. I'd lost the dream of what I thought my life would be. I drove home slowly. The house looked the same as always. White siding, blue shutters, the garden I'd planted 20 years ago. But everything felt different now. This wasn't our house anymore. It was my house. My daughter came over that evening. She'd been at the trial, sitting in the back row. She hugged me tight when she arrived, and we sat on the porch with tea, watching the sunset. "Mom, I'm proud of you," she said. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know. You were strong. You were smart. You didn't let him destroy you." I didn't feel strong, I admitted. I felt scared every single day. "That's what courage is," she said. "Being scared and doing it anyway." My sons came around eventually. The youngest took longer. He'd always been close with David. But even he called a few weeks after the trial. "Mom, I listened to all the recordings. I'm sorry I doubted you." "You were loyal to your father," I said. "I understand that. He didn't deserve my loyalty, not after what he tried to do to you, to us." The criminal case against David took another 6 months. His attorney managed to plead it down to probation, restitution, and community service. No jail time. Part of me was disappointed, but mostly I was just glad it was over. Tiffany disappeared, deleted her social media, moved out of the luxury apartment, vanished. I heard through the grapevine that she'd moved to another state, starting over probably, looking for her next mark. I should hate her, and maybe I do, a little. But mostly, I feel sorry for her. She's young, she'll make mistakes, and maybe one day she'll be on the other side of this. Older, wiser, sitting across from a judge because some man convinced her to betray another woman. David moved into a small apartment across town. He tried to rebuild his business, but the arrest had killed his reputation. The last I heard, he was working as a sales manager at a car dealership. Not the successful businessman he'd pretended to be, just a man trying to survive. We don't talk. Our attorneys handle everything related to the settlement payments. He sends a check every month for the compensatory damages. Never a penny late, probably because his probation depends on it. Do I miss him? Sometimes. Not the man he became, but the man I thought he was. The young husband who made me laugh, the father who taught our kids to ride bikes. That person, or maybe the illusion of that person. I miss him. But I don't miss the lies. I don't miss the fear. I don't miss waking up wondering if today's the day my life falls apart. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I did something I'd never done in my entire life. I traveled alone. Bought a plane ticket to Italy, stayed in small hotels, ate at local restaurants, walked through ancient cities with no plan and no schedule. I was 56 years old, and I was discovering who Grace was when she wasn't someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's teacher. Just Grace. And I liked her. I joined a book club, started volunteering at the library, took up painting. Turns out I'm terrible at it, but it's fun anyway. I spent more time with my kids and my grandchildren. I learned to fix things around the house myself instead of waiting for someone else to do it. The house stopped feeling empty. It started feeling like mine. One afternoon, almost a year after the trial, I was weeding the garden when a car pulled into the driveway. I looked up, shading my eyes against the sun, and saw Rebecca Torres, the forensic accountant. "Mrs. Grace, I hope I'm not intruding," she called out, getting out of her car. "Not at all. What brings you here?" She smiled. "I wanted to check in on you, see how you're doing. I think about your case sometimes. It was one of the most clear-cut frauds I've ever worked on, but also one of the bravest responses. You didn't just roll over, you fought." We sat on the porch and talked for an hour. She told me about other cases, women who'd been in similar situations. Some who fought, some who didn't, some who won, some who lost everything. "You're inspiring," she said. "I tell your story sometimes. Not with names, of course, but the gist of it. About the woman who woke up at midnight, heard her husband's betrayal, and decided in that moment to save herself. It matters. It helps other women realize they can do it too." After she left, I sat on that porch and thought about what she'd said. My story, my fight, my survival. I thought about all the women out there who might be facing something similar, who might wake up one night and hear something that shatters their world, who might feel helpless and scared and alone. And I wanted them to know this: you're stronger than you think. You're smarter than he believes. And you deserve better than betrayal. The midnight phone call changed my life, but not in the way David intended. He thought he was stealing my security. Instead, he woke something up in me, something fierce, something that refused to be a victim. I'm 57 now. I live alone in the house I fought for. I have my children, my grandchildren, my freedom, and my peace. I wake up every morning and make my own choices, answer to no one, trust myself. David tried to take everything from me, but in the end, all he did was teach me that I didn't need him. I never did. And you know what? That's the best gift he could have given me. Some nights, I still stand at that window where I first heard his voice on the phone. I look out at the quiet street, at the life I've built, at the future I fought for. And I smile, because I won. Not just in court, not just with the house. I won my life back. And that's worth more than anything.